Welcome to What's Left, the weekly political discussion challenge in the mainstream left. I'm Eduardo Arca, with co-host, teacher and socialist Andy Lipson, socialist Kenny Cepeda, and artist and leftist Alex. We are online at whatsleftpodcast.com. You can find that link to our site in the episode notes. You can also find my personal social media handle as Don Eduardo Arca on Instagram. Please subscribe, rate, review, turn on your notifications, and share your favorite episode where you found this episode. All right, we also have shirts. If you would like a What's Left shirt, contact Andy for us. All right. Andy, I will hand this over to you. Welcome, James.
Thank you, Eduardo. Alex, Kenny, Andy, it's really a pleasure to be here with you, gentlemen. Thank you for the invitation.
Yeah, well, this invitation, actually, James, you and I have been corresponding over the phone, and you've said, hey, I'd like to just get back on What's Left and give an update on things, more about what's been happening with school. You know, I think that's how I heard of it. You've been on What's Left twice. Once to talk about the attack on your employment that you experienced with LAUSD, and I felt like the other one, I can't remember what the title of it, but for me, I learned more about the kind of spiritual recovery, getting back to a church that you believed in, that wasn't all falling for the crazy nonsense, and felt like they were actually fighting the good fight. You know.
Yes.
And there was other parts of that conversation, but that was the episode that's what I remember most about that second time you were on. But the reason I had contacted you recently was the first episode you were on, where you had talked about how COVID measures were BS and all the things that the PCR test even says not for diagnostic use, even though it was being used diagnostically. Well, that episode was removed by YouTube about 2 months ago, right? And I was like, hey, James, your episode was removed because you were spreading medical misinformation sometime during that episode. Fortunately, it didn't. Normally, we should be off of YouTube for a week for that, but they said, we're not going to do that. Anyway, I contacted you and we talked, and I just was reminded. Well, first of all, how much I enjoyed talking with you, and wanted to have you on an episode. But I think the thing we talked about was both of us coming from the left before we met, and you really coming more from the right, from the conservative. And I feel like there's something meaningful for me in our relationship that has helped me revisit what left and right really means. And at the same time, so I just wanted to talk about that and talk about that with you and talk about that with all of us here. And also with Alex here, because I think he has a more of a view that I've maybe had in the past of like, left is the left and the right is the right. And maybe that I'm not going to speak for him, but I used to think never the two shall meet kind of thing. Anyway, so that's what we're going to do today. And what I invite you to do is first kind of reintroduce yourself to the audience and let people know how you kind of came to us, and then we'll just kind of get into more from there.
All righty. All right. Thank you, Andy. And other than like this last time when we talked, we have talked periodically and texted and had phone conversations periodically since 2021, I would say, right?
Yeah.
So, well, I am James, and I'm from Massachusetts originally, and came out to California approximately 30 years ago. Met my wife Thelma, and we have two teenage college students, son and a daughter, which I'm just very much a family-oriented person here in LA. Public school teacher. Formerly, I'd come out to LA to pursue acting, and fell on my face. And what does an actor do when he falls on his face? Becomes a teacher. So the short story there is I started teaching and found that I really enjoyed it. I taught ELD and just loved the people, loved the community, and it just grew from there. And it's always I still enjoy it, and regardless of the bureaucracy, it's something that I really love. And so that's kind of it in a nutshell. I live in the San Fernando Valley. Like I said, very much a family-oriented guy, right? But love the typical things, family and good food and good friends and enjoying myself and get-togethers. And we are a faithful family of kind of traditionally minded Catholics. If you want to kind of put a label, how I would identify myself. French and Irish, my ethnicity. That's kind of it. Got into teaching a little bit later. Had other jobs, but really tried to pursue the arts wholeheartedly. And that was a change in life where you feel like, okay, I've gone as far as I can go, and to make something new and not feel as though I have failed completely with this quest to do something, whatever that meant. Now looking back, I think it was the best thing that ever happened to me was becoming a teacher and meeting my wife and raising a family and not having, and I think it was really to my betterment because I could see myself not becoming the kind of person that I think I should be if I had continued with acting and like being very selfish and egotistical. And I'm not saying that everybody in that field is like that, but I know that for myself, I didn't like the person that I was becoming. So I felt more of a giving person with teaching, and that that was good. That was good for me. There was a lot of growth. I probably learned more than my students have during the years. So that's that. That's kind of how I would say it, background.
And maybe
have other
a little bit
questions.
about how you came towards us, contacting people who were clearly either anarchists or Marxists and on something called What's Left.
Yeah. Oh, that was it, and that was amazing to me too. And I didn't always start off thinking of myself as like a conservative. I think I always leaned towards that. Maybe more like kind of a Reagan style Democrat or something, but definitely lean more towards conservative, what we would call, label conservative values. But when we were in the early stretches of lockdown, COVID time, but it must have been probably, I would say, late fall 2020 or early winter 2021 when I came across one of your episodes. Um, um, and I can't remember the title, but it just blew me away. The destroying schools to save schools.
Mm-hmm.
And that just resonated with me a whole lot. No one was saying, no one was speaking about those things in the way that you and Eduardo and the other guests on there. To my point of view, everything was, you got to go with this program and be a good boy and follow along and don't question anything. And like we've said before, I don't think that I have some kind of clairvoyancy or anything, but I smelled a rat from the very beginning, right? That was just so. When I came across that episode, I don't normally contact people on YouTube or contact that, but I just had to. I just had to reach out to you. I thought that what you guys were going through, no matter where you were from, I don't even care the title, What's Left or whatever. You guys could have had all Che Guevara t-shirts on at that time, and I would have been perfectly fine with that. Say, I need to talk to these guys, right? So, and I did, and it's really been it's been a godsend, really, you know, So.
Yeah, and I remember both. And Eduardo, you can speak about this. I just remember when you first reached out to us, and me and Eduardo got a chance to talk to you on the phone beforehand, just to kind of sound it out, because I could tell like you were coming from a different background, and I wanted this to be an episode that would work. But I was like, this is another school teacher who's standing their ground. That was important to me, is you were really standing your ground. Um, Maybe not on a political basis, but on a religious basis. That's not how I saw it. But as firmly fixed in your beliefs as I was in mine, and maybe even going farther than even maybe your family wanted you to go in some ways. And since I had so few allies around me, I mean, I can name a few, but I had so few and I lost so many. I was very glad to have to hear a fellow California teacher,
Mhm.
somebody I could talk to. So that was really meaningful to me. And maybe Eduardo, I don't know if you could say more about what your impression was when we first met James.
And me as well from down here in LA. Sorry, Eduardo. Me as well. That was feeling like there's no one around here that feels like I do. So sorry, Eduardo. Go ahead.
No, you're fine. I think it's all mutual. I think we were at a time when we felt isolated, and so, using that word during that time, isolated. You know, and we didn't feel support from even our own friends in community. I had Andy, but maybe I thought Andy and I were the only crazy people. And then, you know, you had but that time, by that time, I think I had really felt the push away from my community, because I had been accepted by just trying to be this moderate sort of person, and I thought maybe Andy had gone too far, and Kenny, on what's left. And then when I was being pushed away by even my own community members, that's when I truly felt isolated. And having you and other people that we've met through all of this was definitely reassuring.
Yeah, and maybe I'll start us on what I think is maybe the meat of our episode, and say, and let's see where it takes us. So I guess I am talking about this on this channel from what's left. I think me, Kenny, and Eduardo have increasingly become skeptical of the political divisions that have been talked about as the left and the right. And as those divisions being helpful in helping people understand who their natural allies are. And I will say, as a revolutionary, I used to think that I had more fuel here on the left, and there wasn't anything there on the right for me as a person who wanted a revolution. I'm an anti-capitalist. I call myself a Marxist. That's what I used to think. And I no longer think that at all. I think there are revolutionaries on the left. I think there are revolutionary hearts on the right. I do think ultimately that revolutionary hearts on the right could probably use familiarity with capitalism and Marxism. And I have now of the belief that there's a political audience across the entire stretch of the working class, and left and right doesn't help me find who I can talk to. But I guess I want to talk personally about what the impact, how my relationship with you, James, has helped reinforce that. I remember calling you when I was really struggling in Mission. Like, there weren't many people I could talk to. I have a colleague, AJ, but she wasn't really saying anything, and she was against what was happening, but she was kind of keeping it on the lowdown. I did not have any other teachers who were basically right up front saying "fuck you" to all this, and somebody I could talk to about, like, okay, but I might lose all this, you know. And I remember hearing your struggle at it, and I remember it being so helpful for me to be able to call you and talk with you about that, and for me to hear your determination and your willingness to put forward that principle, regardless of you of being a deep Catholic, and I'm an atheist, and maybe you don't believe in abortion rights, and I believe in pro-choice. Maybe there's other things around immigration. Maybe there's even things about Marxism. All I know is that when there was a person who, when I needed to talk to somebody about feeling isolated and standing up for what I believed was right, you were somebody who actually helped give me the courage to do that. And I did not want to disappoint you, because you were standing up for yourself over there. And I don't want to be calling you and saying, I kind of let it down, you know? Not that but I just, you know, that helped fuel this thing for me. And furthermore, beyond that, after all this was done, and I feel like my life got better as a result of me standing up for my principles, and I got even to get better place in work and things like that. Mm-hmm. Then we did Workers and Students for Choice, and you were somebody I could contact around that. And you came in and helped us build Workers and Students for Choice and made it a real thing. And then you kind of moved away from maybe going to the regular meetings, but anytime there was a contact from LA who contacted us, hey, do you know anybody in LA who who is not down with the nonsense,
Mhm.
yeah, here's James. You can call him. You
Right.
know, and then you would send me updates about what was going on in LAUSD. And I guess what I would say is, I, regardless of whether you've moved politically or not from where you were, I have like it's trust. Like it that is it is what this experience has helped not convince me of or make me think is that organizing is much more about trust than it is about left and right. And trust is somebody who's going to be honest, who's going to stand up for their principles, even principles I might not agree with, you know, but I know they're not going to bullshit me, and I know they're not going to lie to me. And it was very refreshing, and it has opened up for me the possibility of, like, I'm much more open to the idea of I can meet people like James anywhere. Um, and they still have to prove something to me. They still have to prove that they'll stand up for what they believe in and be honest and be humble. Um, but it was very meaningful for me to meet you, and to not just meet you, but to grow with you and to have you. And I think it's that experience. This is what I really wanted to share on the show today, to be honest. That experience has hardened my view. And Brian is my comrade, and I love this guy, but we will argue about this still. It has hardened my view that there's nothing to be talked about it in terms of left and right, that it's all about revolution or reform, and that my comrades are the people around me who are truthful and honest, um, even if we don't agree. And that's a starting point for finding my comrade. So I guess I'll start with that.
Wow. I we better cut the recording now, because anything I say now is never going to live up to what Andy just just said. I'm honored, Andy, to hear those words from you. Thank you. And it just the feeling really is mutual, because I felt I could trust you, and that really what it all boils down to in our lives is this sense of trust, right? That not even sense of trust, but trust. It's so important. People will feel let down by those in positions of authority, be it a bishop or a priest, and feel let down by them. And that trust, when that trust gets destroyed, it can drive people away from their faith, unfortunately. It can drive people away from a career that maybe they love to do, um, and drive people away from their partners. We see it, and it's all built on trust. Even just a simple business transaction, when we go into the store, there's an element of trust that we expect that we're going to get what we came in there to get, and it's going to be, whatever it is. So that really resonates with me, the idea of trust. And I think that these left right labels now, um, I just can't see myself going back to say, I have an R after my name, or a D after my name, or something like that. It I don't have trust in those, right? So going back to that, I don't have trust in them at all. I don't know who is the um, um, proxy warrior or controlled opposition. They can be saying one thing one way, and I just feel that that I'm being lied to, and not just from the main media, but whoever it is in these political positions or whatever. It's pretty sad. It's pretty sad, actually, that it has come to this. And this is I was thinking about how I was able to smell the rat with COVID, but yet going back to 2001, how I didn't smell the rats after September 11th, 2001, where ready to, I was ready to put on the uniform and go, pretty much, and just, and I've been really trying to discern in myself, why that was, that I bought into that. And I consider myself a very skeptical person. I was raised by two mom and dad who always said, don't believe everything you read. Don't believe half of what you see, none of what you hear, kind of thing. So so COVID, I felt, I'm not, I don't trust this at all. But what I'm trying to say is there were other things where I was blinded. I was blinded to it. You know, um, so 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 there. Yeah, that was a bad pause. I ran out of steam.
I have a question for so just how we see this left and right divide, and you've mentioned it, Andy. You talked about it right now, James. How do we see it? Moldy, all of us. I don't know. I could go, or
I'll go just because I haven't really spoken up yet too much. Well, I guess for me, a lot of my own idea of the left-right divide in reality, aside from my studies, in reality, it's built on the place that I come from. I come from Bakersfield, and for anyone that doesn't know too much about Bakersfield, California, it's a place that is dominated by white farmer aristocracy, and sort of like they have kind of a cultural monopoly and a political monopoly, and the the acceptability of my own beliefs, which have varied across time, but I've always been someone who has been a critic of the system of the government. Going back to when I was a kid, being anti, Iraq War, Afghanistan War, anti-imperialist, and people laughing at me, having smoke grenades thrown at us during the Black Lives Matter protests in Bakersfield, going to punk shows and having to face off with Nazi skinheads, I know the reality of like this brought to combat, and I don't think that it needs to go there. And that's why I'm interested in having these kinds of discussions. But I also think that there is a meaning. I mean, whether or not we want to have these bridges where we can have like common communication and peace, I think we need to acknowledge that we're coming from different angles, or if we're coming from different angles, and what particular, because, I'm a historian by trade in terms of like, that's my main thing that I've ever studied in life. And I believe in the idea of ideological lineage. We all have to acknowledge the things that inspire us the most, the things that we believe in the most. I think, we shouldn't be kidding ourselves about trying to describe what it is that we truly want and desire in this world. And the fact of the matter for me is, when we talk about, Andrew, like revolution and I first of all need to acknowledge, like, I know that, these so-called left governments have created a lot of oppression, but I think there's also something I want to highlight in what you were saying, Andy. You say there are revolutionary hearts on the right. You did not say that there are revolutionary minds, and you made kind of a reference to the fact that there was yet another stage that had to happen. I think this is critical. This is very important because what the right even means or has represented up until this point is the preservation of a system of either aristocracy or capital accumulation of profit or whatever else it might be, enforced, social norms, et cetera, et cetera. While this thing might have transformed with time, again, there's a historical heritage to follow here. And what we can accuse the left of being is hypocritical, but what that means is, the answer to that is just to not be a hypocrite. And this is where I agree. The idea of us being open and honest is critical. Like, for whatever movement you're a part of, if you're not being open and honest, that's what causes all the great historical errors of any movement that has failed. People get caught up in their system of lies. They're trying to manipulate a situation to their advantage, and it becomes very deep. But aside from that, in terms of the way that I would like society to be framed, I do see the left-right division as a division between, the horizontal and the vertical structure of society. And I think that these two things are, I mean, literally diametrically opposed. Does that mean that we as people can't have conversation, or that we can't, when it comes to different issues in our life, work together, depending on the varied things that come up? No, I mean, I see us first and foremost as humans. I don't want to overly label things, on a political level, but I also don't think that there's a meaning, that it's fully meaningless to say, oh, I'm left or I'm right, because I think there's lots, you're communicating a lot about what your end goal is. And I understand that we're faced with a lot of problems that need immediate solutions, but I try to take as holistic an approach as possible. And I want to keep an eye to everything that I'm capable of keeping my eye towards. And I know that the ideas of the left, the ideas of popular democracy, the ideas of social revolution, the ideas of the dismantling of systems of, ancestral oppression, those are the ones that I believe in. Those are the ones that I want to see flower. Those are the ones that, when I dream of a better tomorrow, those are the things that I see. So, and James, I imagine, that isn't exactly your vision. I mean, I would love to hear, some of what you have to say about that, but that's kind of where, I mean, yes, I want to have these conversations about where on individual issues as people we can kind of work together, because I think I want to believe in peace anyway, but like, for example, I believe in, disengaging from the incoming global war, and the fact of the matter is most people on the right are just endorsing it, like they're paternalist, they're nationalistic, they're jingoistic, and they want to, maintain their grip over that identity. And then the people on the left, again, they're hypocrites. They're saying that they would oppose a war, but then they really wouldn't. But then for me, that just leaves a position of actually, going against the war. And to me, that motive lays more on one side than on the other, historically and currently.
Yeah, can I add something there? Yep. I personally, I've come to the point now where I just flat out reject being labeled white, no matter the tone of my pigment of my skin or what have you. I would rather identify as, first of all, even more than American, I would identify as Catholic. Okay, even with all the baggage that might come along with, but I identify as Catholic, and I identify as French Irish descent. Okay, but that's just me. But my question, Alex, that I like to ask, since mention Marxism and revolution, and what was Karl Marx honest? Was he an honest person?
No, well, I don't think I ever really said specifically that I was a Marxist, and
No, not
I'm
you.
inspired. Yeah, sure, but I'm just, the fact of the matter is, like, Marx, what he was honest about was his critical analysis of the capitalistic system. It's dead on. I'm not throwing the baby out with the bathwater just because he missed out on a ton of other stuff, because he was a limited person of his time, of his era, of it. I understand all those things. And I don't think that any individual human is ever going to have the complete blueprint for the future of humanity. I choose to say that I follow in some way in the, I try to incorporate that stream into the stream that I'm, going with. I've chosen to acknowledge both the benefits and the drawbacks of the historical legacy of Marxism. I wouldn't call myself, again, like a capital M Marxist. I'm inspired by Marx. I certainly think that his critique of capitalism and the way that it has formed in this world is very important. I think that his understanding of feudal systems of control and how that transitioned into the market system of control is very important. And honestly, I mean, I believe his critique of religion on a mimetic level as suppressing popular will is very important. That is, I come from a Catholic background. My brother just went to seminary yesterday, my younger brother. I used to want to be a priest. But I would say that that's another big thing. As much as I want to try to keep my manners and everything, I am anti-state and I am anti-religion. That doesn't mean that I am anti-spirituality or anti-spiritual or religious belief. I just believe that, much like the states in our world, we need to dismantle the political organizations the religious organizations, because they are complicit in the situation. If we want to complain about things like COVID or what, the Catholic Church is a prime example of a system of mass control and manipulation. The Middle Ages were not kind. I mean, I don't have to go too much on about the weight of the way that the Catholic Church framed European and European descended political machinations. So for me, it's all participle of this situation.
Yeah, I'd like to respond to that. The idea of capitalism being somehow inherently evil, and you didn't say that exactly, so I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, Alex, but Karl Marx's view of warfare between the ownership class, the working class, etc., even warfare between husband, wife, parent, and child. That's all been dealt with. That's all been dealt with because greed is wrong. And so if it's a factory owner in England and abusing his workers with the looms, etc., that's wrong. Okay, on any level, whether it's slavery or whether it's Nike in Vietnam to abuse the workers, make them take a shot, or threaten them, coerce them. That's wrong on so many levels, and you don't need Karl Marx to tell you that, right? So the other thing I would respectfully say with regards to the Catholic Church, I would never sit here and say that there hasn't been vast episodes of corruption, um, crimes committed, right, in the name of God, in the name of Catholicism. However, I would respectfully say that we're all products of a Whig English history system in this country. We're a Protestant country primarily, and history has always been told from the English point of view, that the Spanish were the wrong ones, and the English were the correct ones in their coming to the so-called New World and all that. So that's what I would just say. Have there been abuses through time? Yes, of course. I mean, you can go back to all the way back to what Judas did, right? And that was a flaw right there, right? But you don't give up on Christ because of what Judas did.
And, one second.
I gotta say, like,
let me just ask a question.
Sure.
Yeah. Because I think Eduardo had asked the question, and I do think this is partly useful, but I do think it's worth, James, you actually saying what you think that right and left, because I think that's what you were responding to, Alex. And I'd like to hear from James and others as well. What does that right and left mean to you? Because that was your original question. Is that right, Eduardo?
Yeah.
Well, I don't want to be glib, but to me right now, the right means Hulk Hogan, at that nonsense that they're trying to pull with this new, Trump 2.0. That to me is the right. This, whatever you want to make of that assassination attempt, that seems to be the right, and the left, the cackling and okay, you know what? The left is really come to the point of Moloch worship.
And let's maybe go around, because I'll say something about my thoughts about right and left. And I think I'll do it also in terms of the way Alex had framed it. I had seen in the past the right as forces of stagnation, forces of maintaining things the way they are, and in particular, maintaining capitalism. I would call myself a Marxist, and I currently would consider myself a Marxist, even though there are parts of Marx that I'm coming to kind of have questions about. But his critique, the statements that he had his analysis of capitalism, because there were people well before Marx who saw capitalism as the root of some of the social evils that were spreading across the globe. But I do believe he has helped really in a way of rooting it in labor and in the extraction of and the exploitation of labor, and that profit is bound in that, and that the competition for profits and the description of how that works, and the crisis that can be bred as a result of that, that's built in, like these are structural, so that he didn't make capitalism about greed. He made capitalism a system that was about just, this is the way the rules are. In order to be successful, you better be greedy, because you're not going to be successful unless you are. Or you better have people who are at the front of your organization who are greedy, because otherwise you cannot play this game. And he was saying this is the game that the entire globe has subjected itself to play, and that capitalists will benefit from maintaining that, and the rest of us won't, even if we're told we will. So I had seen the right as maintainers of that capitalist system, and I had seen the left as the only place out of which somebody might say, no, we got to puncture that system. Like, so I had seen the only possibility of puncturing that capitalist system could come from the left, because left was for change. There could be reform and there could be revolutionaries within that, but it was the left that was for change.
But communism has always needed capitalism
well,
to survive.
Yeah. Well, I would say, when I talk about the change that I'm looking for, I'm talking about workers across the globe running their own lives, not being told what they have to put into their body, not being told what they have to do at work. They get to decide for themselves across the globe that this is what it's freedom, it's democracy and liberty. That's what I saw as socialism, and I still see it as communism and socialism.
Yeah.
But I thought the only way of doing that was come out of the left. I no longer believe that, because while I do believe that the divide between workers, that workers being divided over racism and sexism, there's more discussions like that on the left. There's also on the left a deep and abiding slavery to the state and the idea of the state as something that will help you. And if you go over to the right, you will see people who are arming themselves in preparation for that state coming after them, and who have a deeper awareness, like, because that arming of yourself is a key part of the possibility of revolution. And in some ways, that act and that desire to, and even if they certainly don't necessarily see themselves as taking down capitalism, but in their opposition to the state, and they're willing to essentially arm themselves and fight the state with their own blood and weapons, that there's a revolutionary current in that you will not find on the left. You won't find it. At least I've never found it. And so that has made me say, look, there's plenty of places to search for oil, in all the population. That's why I've come to this viewpoint, or how I've come to this viewpoint. And I'll leave it at that, because I think I want to also hear from Kenny and maybe even Eduardo comes back to that.
Why does it, Kenny? Do you want to go?
Sure. So I guess similarly to Libsyn and Alex, I guess I'll go with COVID. COVID has completely transformed the way I understand what's going on in the world. And I have been an anti-capitalist forever. I went to UC Berkeley with this idealism, only to realize that wasn't the place I thought it was, that people weren't standing for the things I thought they would stand for. And COVID was that time where everything was unmasked about what I thought the left was. And so, because there were people that I thought would show up, for principles, principles of freedom, principles of choice, for choice, your body, your choice, right? Like, these are chants that have been regurgitated over and over. And so that period showed me that that division, it's more of the same, right? Divide and conquer. That quintessential necessity for anybody who wants to wield power. Divide and conquer. And so, yes, that division is no longer the way I see the world. I more see myself in terms of finding allies in people who have those principles, and ultimately who forget the rhetoric, forget ideas. What do you do when shit hits the fan, right? Because again, like, there's a lot of cognitive dissonance on both sides. There's people who say they're about some shit. Like, I can name, because you are saying, listen, like, that there are people on the right arming themselves, but there's also people on the right wielding, the flag of the state who wants to suppress them, right? Like, and so there's dissonance on the left too. Like, the left what talks about freedom, but they're all about the state. They're all about Big Brother. They're all about surveillance. They're about censoring. And so there's inconsistencies on both sides. And this is what I wanted to talk to you off camera, Lipson. That the COVID period was, to me, because we had a conversation off the screen with Alex, that it wasn't a minor thing. It's a historical event, a political event that showed where do you stand, right? And what principles are you willing to stand up for and pay a consequence for, right? And we all, a lot of the people on the show paid different prices. People went to different distances in order to stand up, right? And we respected that, right? Not everyone that I talked to professed in public their disapproval for what was happening. And what I witnessed in San Francisco was a complete viciousness that reminded me of what I thought the right wing was, right? This complete support of control, state, and maintaining the thing, the way they are, blah 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 blah. And so, and I'm thankful for this, because that romance as a leftist, has been lifted, because I have had to look back into the history of communism and socialism. I lived in Nicaragua. That was another thing that unveiled some things. Nicaragua being a so-called socialist state, right? Like, and seeing the deep corruption of a capitalist system that names itself a socialist. And then now I realize that, and this is why I am a Marxist, because I do see that what Alex described, what Lipson is describing, that this critique, an analysis really of what the capitalist system is. Because and I think even a lot of leftists don't fully understand, or I disagree with their understanding of what capitalism is, right? And thus their solutions are state control, and so, because I don't think they understand what the fundamentals of capitalism, and I didn't myself. I'm still uncovering certain things, but I do find that a useful framework in understanding what is going on in the world. But at the same time, during the COVID period, I was able to realize that again, rhetoric and ideas are one thing. Actions are the real thing that I'm after. What you two were talking about, right? That trust that was built, in that ability to be honest, about what you think and follow it through action. And that's one thing we've talked about on the show, that as a revolutionary part of as a part of the revolutionary process, action is principle. Actual based on principles that you're going to be consistent about. And so again, during COVID, I was also able to talk to people that I would not have talked to before, right? People who I'm told are just right wingers, people who I was programmed to have strong feelings against, right? And then I realized the deep levels of mind control that we've been subjected to, in in all of us, really, and that's something we all have to bring into question. And so, I before even COVID, I was already moving away from some classical, or that more, I guess, liberal ideas, right? Of tax the rich. That's not going to change shit. Gun control, that's not going to change shit. This single issue BS, really. And so, no, I'm like, fuck you. I'm not gonna give more money to this state to go waste on wars. Fuck you. Sorry for the language, but that's my honesty. Uh, you know, oh, you want our guns because you say that's gonna keep us safer. That's not what's destroying the fabric of society in the world. And so I see. So what I'm looking for is for people who have similar questions. In what I'm bringing to the table is this: that I'm a Marxian and I analyze capitalism through these lenses because this explains the way of my life. It doesn't explain some theoretical shit, which we still theorize, but it explains the life I've lived. It explains why my dad had to leave as a political refugee from Guatemala from a war that killed 200 to 300,000 people. It explains, why I think borders are a system of control. They're not about protecting anybody, and so on and so on. And so I'm more willing to talk to people who are willing to do something about what they see as being wrong, right? So I'm looking for people who know something is wrong, but they want to do something about on principles that are going to be consistent. And so it turns out that most of my so-called comrades on the left, they're not even willing to listen really to a lot of this stuff. They're too emotionally committed. And I think it's part of the propaganda that comes through the institutions that we are part of. And just like Alex, I do criticize, institutionalized religion. I am all about spirituality. I respect that. But I am highly critical of any system of social control, of social or where power is, given to a few people on the top on a hierarchical thing, because ultimately I do believe, and this comes from my experience of living in Guatemala in a marginal community, out of the control of state. Really, like the cops didn't have a lot of powers. The major, they didn't do any fucking work there. And I've seen disasters where people rise up and leaders are born in disasters. Just like during COVID, some people stood up and said, we need to feed our community. We need to show up for the most vulnerable. So that's what I'm about. And again, I'm rethinking everything I've been told, and I'm in that process at the moment.
Yeah. Me too, Kenny.
Yeah. I mean, I think there was I think being Mexican, sometimes you see, like I said in a previous episode, you see these sort of defined lines here in the USA because they don't happen so much in like other countries. But I studied here in San Francisco. I also was indoctrinated into a lot of the left wing progressive politics, and when you live in a bubble, these things sometimes seep into your psyche, and you have these clear divisions and being told who's the enemy and who's not, and so you are constantly seeing the people who are opposing you as the wrong people, and there's all this infighting, right? There's all this, but like I said, during my time during 2020, I had the experience that I felt as a Jehovah's Witness, that I felt it got cut off. No, I felt as a Jehovah's Witness where people turned on me that were within the same sphere, the people that I were in my community. And so that's how those things led to my changes. In further studying and about how I could see myself working with other people who are on the other side of the aisle, so to speak, I began to think like how some of the stories and in history sometimes like I have overlooked. I remember working in 2015. I was working a summer during the music festival scene in England, well, all of the UK, because we traveled, and I was working with Magical Youth, this group of people, and one of the people that have long been hippies and alternative folks that just embraced the vagabond kind of life throughout all of the UK. They had shared with me stories that I then came to think about during 2020 when I thought about how left and right could work together. You know, there was LGBT workers and miners in Wales, well, that teamed up together, and they formed this coalition that now is made into history and also films, few alternative films if anyone wants to check them out, where you have this very small minor strike in Wales with a conservative town really out in the boonies of Wales, and then you have these leftists, LGBT workers teaming up together to fight against the oppression at that time in the 80s from Margaret Thatcher, who was able to who was anti-union, and people can go on further and read about this, and it's very heartening how much they share about their difficulties working together, because a lot of them were very religious, a lot of them also were very conservative about how they thought about the LGBT folk, but they worked together, and it's not the perfect story, but they definitely had a lot of success. I think about also back when W.E.B. Du Bois, the U.S. American communist, or how would you say, Andy? He's Marxist, I think, right? I'm not sure. Well, he was definitely someone who believed in uniting workers. I'm going to read a line that he said to a group of people who were not necessarily Marxist or communist. They were just mostly members of Southern Negro Youth Congress and workers and other dissatisfied groups across the South. He said, "This is the firing line, not simply for the emancipation of the American Negro, but for the emancipation of the African Negro and the Negroes of the West Indies." And then he says, no, for the emancipation of the colored races. And then he says, and for the emancipation of the white slaves of modern capitalist monopoly. This is what he said to a large crowd of black and white workers. These workers in the South, these were mostly black Southern sharecroppers and factory employees and in various low-wage jobs. And he was speaking to African-American veterans, but also to other whites that were there. Regarding the word white, James, I fully understand, like my friend Jake, who lives in now North Carolina, he doesn't like to be identified as white, by the way. And he thinks that sort of minimizes his own background, just for conventional sake, just because I'm reading something that was often used at that time. We know from those decades, we're talking 1940s, all that time, that's how these things were classified. We even know Mexicans were considered white at that time. So it's very broad use at the time. So I'm only using in contextualizing what I'm reading. So I think about that link, and then I think about also my time in 2019 when I was in France participating in one of the longest strikes in history, of French history. When I was in France, I saw a lot of before that, the Yellow Vest movement had already started before 2019. But again, it had come up again in 2019. And I think about how there was a lot of conservative striking workers on strike. And then there were also folks that wanted to unite against Macron. And that was left and right. That wasn't just strictly right and left. And I remember having those conversations where I'd see Palestinian flags on one side, and then there were like very nationalist workers on another side. And those conversations were also hard to have, because I remember participating, and one of my friends, Alex, she really did give me a chance she let me in onto a lot of these groups that were going way too fast for my French, discussing how to better work together in coalitions. And whether they had success or not, because I left in 2020, in January 2020, but these were ongoing conversations they were having. I just remember seeing the work that was being done between these people that were coming from different sides. Some people were anti-immigration. That's why they voted for Marine Le Pen. And other people were anti-Macron because they thought he was this narcissist who was also just for using his power to to take away pension reforms and all these kind of reforms he was making onto the French law. Anyhow, and I also think about recently with Jessica, our other co-host, who shared with us about the important work that's being done at Thacker Pass with ranchers and Native Americans and environmentalists who have different opinions and sides normally. And these environmentalists and ranchers, conservative ranchers, are not always used in the same sentence together. But what they have done together to work together to be able to resist more mining that's happening at Thacker Pass. And so I guess these experiences have taught me and have also made me rethink about these divides. And I don't think I'm not sure, maybe you all might disagree, but I don't know if this episode is a conversation about what ideology is best to incorporate for a better society. I think what we're discussing here is more so the left and right divide that we have been all told to do, right? I mean, it helps people. I think that we definitely know this. There are people who are at the elite top, and we know that there are the rest of us. And I consider us to be the rest of us. Whether we agree with some sort of system that incorporates capitalism, such as my friend he vouches for capitalism, but without crony capitalism. Jake, who's my dear friend, or we have this other communist approach, which I'm not a communist, and I don't really think that that's the way to go. I think what we can all agree on is that we are all being used in some way by elite class, and that be left or right. In this case, as I see it, with the DNC and the RNC that I have watched recently, I have seen the Democrats' hypocrisy come through their lips as they talk about Obama criticizing Trump about separating children from families when all he did was deport a bunch of families as well. And I just couldn't see how he could talk about that so easily, criticizing someone else when he was labeled by many people on the left as the porter-in-chief. Or when I see Kamala Harris with her, discussing what do you call it? Her background as a prosecutor, putting a lot of Black and brown people that look like her in prison because of marijuana, and laughing about how she smoked a little blunt here and there back in her day. So, I mean, or penalizing parents for the truancy when we could have found different ways to work with families in schools now, right? So I think of all these hypocrites at the DNC and the RNC, and it's all really a way for us to be divided amongst each other. That's the conversation we're having right now. It's like, how do we look in history with the examples I've given to further progress, so to speak, as workers, right? Wherever our thoughts of schools of thought we think should be incorporated into our system. And so that's what I have now learned and have definitely solidified in 2020, 2021, when I had experiences that were very heartbreaking, and I shared, and I don't want to really go into it because it's like re-traumatizing PTSD and talking about things that I felt my friends, so-called friends of mine, were going to back me, and they didn't. And so what I have learned from those experiences is to not follow a cult as I was made to believe. and the cult was liberal, progressive, left politics, SF politics, so, specifically. And another thing that makes the left and right coalition, now that something came up for me, is that I see this whole thing about how gun control is a white or conservative issue, when the whole NRA really got sparked and more, what do you call it, ignited to do something more of a political work because of the Black Panther Party, because they were the ones inciting, really coming. There's a good podcast I was listening to where they were beginning to exercise their right of the Second Amendment, which to the militia to support their right to hold an arm and to supervise police back in Oakland when they were being they were being watched and spied on by the police. And here the Black Panther Party decided to take up arms, and then they took their arms up to state building, and then they had discussions about that. And then people on the right, again, using that for conventional sake, because again, I don't think people consider themselves to be right. They think they just consider themselves to be town folk or people from Idaho or people from, that's how I think people first identify as. And then they decided to also unite around the importance of their Second Amendment. So people have always somehow found themselves at the crossroads of how they need to come together when we find solidarity around a certain issue. And that's when these things get sort of sorted out, these issues, such as the Welsh miners with the LGBT workers, right? Or such as the people at Thacker Pass, or whether the Yellow Vest movement, or the people that the black workers and the white workers down south in Alabama. And so that's that's how I'm seeing all of this. And so I've mentioned a few things. So I think what I'll do when I look back at this episode is I'll just, for anyone who's interested, I'll list down some resources they can look further to the podcast that I referred to towards the Yellow Vest movement and towards also the French politics, and towards the Welsh miners as well.
Alex or James?
Well, I'm trying to figure out my approach, because I was just taking in everything that everybody was saying. I guess for me, the something you said, Eduardo, that I think we do need to agree on, but I guess it's something that I wonder how much it actually reflects the situation right now, is like this idea that like we're being taken advantage of, we're being lied to, we're being manipulated, we're being, and even James, you had said like, you don't want to go into the D into the R after your name and all of that, and I mean, I totally agree on that idea. I mean, the two party system that has existed, and this idea of the division between liberal and conservative. I mean, I think it's a very limited way of looking at politics, or and it's somebody else's game, But I guess that's the thing, though, that and again, going back to James, something you said, capitalism is not inherently evil, or or even kind of saying that like the Catholic Church did something so bad, but then it kind of is done with that or whatever. My thing is like I'm not trying to play somebody else's game. What I'm trying to construct is equal participation of people. And I think we don't do that through maintaining traditional structures. When we talk about creating a community, James, that's something you highlighted a lot. Your belief in community and family. I think that a lot of these ideas that people have about what's necessary to maintain the family, the types of systems that encourage family or community, I think we've been lied to. In a lot of ways, our entire going back to a Neolithic time, the entire conceptualization of the identity of what's good for us and why we fight is intense. Because again, I have to emphasize the fact that people are about to go to and are going to die for a war of capital gains, a war of power manipulation. It's that same old playbook. And again, I just can't shake the feeling that one side is tipped in the balance of what started the problem to begin with, while again the other one, what you can accuse it of is of not living up to its own potential. But again, that just returns me to the point that I made of, then it just sounds like we just need to live up to that potential. I don't know where, because we cannot be creating a, because here, there was something I really wanted to touch on that somebody had said. Yeah, I mean, this idea of like the systems that we're creating and endorsing, I think we need to have a clear idea of what it is we're trying to build between each other. What are we trying to replace the system with? This conversation about right wingers and like the gun control. Andy, you had brought it up. First of all, like I myself, I believe in everyone's, right to the education about the use of an arm. I understand if not everyone wants to bear and maintain arms. I think that's a different conversation, but I think everybody should be educated in the use of them, because I do believe, especially in that militia component, I believe in times of necessary self-defense, it's good for people to know how to operate arms if there's a reserve of them, that are maintained by a community. But to return to the example that Eduardo was talking about, to me, I mean, that's an example of this division that needs to be reconciled somehow. If we want to work together as equals, we have to come up with the fact that only a couple of generations ago, the NRA was first railing against the mass use of guns in a political level, and now in the current day is actively encouraging the display of weapons by right-wing militias that I have to remind everyone are connected to ideas like Nazism, neo-Confederatism, a belief in, again, and James, as much as I do want to respect your call to your heritage, James, like the French Irish, that's a rich story. As a historian, I want to know that story. But unfortunately, also on the political stage, these forces of white nationalism are inexorably tied with a lot of these ideas of tradition, and they again exist for real. I think a lot of people are going to end up marching because something I always bring up, my historical period is World War I and the German Revolution during that time. The fact of the matter is you had number one, an armed populace at that time, and also people that were sailors, soldiers, people that were fed up with the system. And you had so-called leaders that were trying to get them to subvert their own expectations. And they ended up hiring literal fascist thugs that would go on to build the groundwork for the Nazi party. So as much as as much as I understand, like we need to build bridges and things. Again, this is what I talk about when I talk about the historical weight. And another thing you said, James, you said communism has always needed capitalism. The fact of the matter is, once capitalism identified socialism, communism, and anarchism as dangers to its existence, it has tried and has continued a continual war, has waged a continual war of oppression, both physically and mentally, against anyone who tries to maintain that kind of an idea. It happened during the First World War. There's been infiltration in the 1960s, 1950s, COINTELPRO, right? The takedown of the Black Panthers, all of these things, the amount of people want to act as if it's about, oh, we're going to have this common ground and everyone's going to get their chance to speak. But historically, that's not the situation that was allowed. And whether or not you want to change your tone now, you have to make up for the thousands of years, if you want to, and at the very least hundreds of years of oppression that has happened from people on this traditional or whatever kind of right you want to talk about. They have maintained a protracted campaign of not playing fair, and then of always accusing the other side of not playing fair, when almost always they were always the first ones to escalate it to violence. They were the ones to escalate it to dishonesty, to manipulation. These things, in the cause of anti-communism and anti-leftism, so many people have been jailed, destroyed. The Black Panthers are a perfect example. They were treated like animals. They were treated like less than people. So it's difficult for me because, as much as I want to believe the positive intentions of James, there are people that are 1 or 2 degrees of separation from him that are actively plotting the death and suppression of me and my comrades. And that's something that I have to contend with. That's the truth of the matter.
Yeah, I'd like to respond to that. There's like scattershot approach, Alex, that you're making there, and I try my best to try to respond to each one. And I don't think you're going to like this. The Catholic Church is the most welcoming place in the world because anyone is welcome to become Catholic. Now, you may not want to, and I respect that. Andy may not want to, I respect that. But you cannot say that if somebody wants to explore further the Catholic faith, belief in Christ, right, as the savior of the world, then that person is going to find someone to help them do that. Now, you might consider that brainwashing or whatever. That's all fine and dandy. But and the other thing too, no one is forced to go to mass on Sunday, right? No one's forced to. Now, when we're little kids, okay,
not anymore. That was only a couple hundred years ago.
That's a different. No one was. No, you know. Yeah, like I say, I fully admit that there have been abuses. But see, that's the point that I want to respond to. This is what I gather here is this quest to find your answers in men, and you're not going to find any answers in men. And you smile when I say this, and this is very good.
I have to, because this is the entire point of my thing. No,
you're putting your faith in men, and these man-ruled institutions. And again, look at Pope Francis says many things that bother me, but I know when he is speaking ex cathedra and when he's giving an interview on a plane off the cuff, right? So I know the difference between that. And then I think that Eduardo and Kenny make very good points about Eduardo's examples of the ranchers and the Native Americans, and then the LGBT
environmentalists.
Yeah, and the environmentalists. That shouldn't be taken lightly either. So that goes to show that, as Kenny said, people need to do something, even in a small level, whatever somebody can do, whether it is helping in a food pantry 2 days a week. If that's all that they can do, then that's a good thing to do, and that's what I think is a positive step in the right direction. So look at I'm happy to go adversarial with you, Alex, and I just want to know what you think about that.
Well, let me just address this real quick.
Go ahead.
The Catholic Church is not. We're looking at entirely different faces for sure, because to my view, what the Catholic Church is a model of the false consciousness, of the false welcoming, of the manipulation of people. Again, from its point of conception.
Be specific.
The bishops
Jesus
of Rome.
Christ started the church.
No. You're
wrong.
The Pontifex Maximus, a title that the Pope still claims to this day.
So
is what the Catholic Church is.
So I think this is what we have mentioned in previous episodes. The fact that I would love, and maybe James, it would be wonderful to have as well, Andy's brother, who is also a religious man. But the conversation we're having is about religion and Catholic Church, and that is a whole entire episode that I would love for us to jump on to. If we can make that episode happen, Andy, for September.
Here's my recommendation.
I recommend. No disrespect. Did Jesus Christ say to Peter, upon you are the rock, and upon you I will build my church? According
to the scripture handed down by other people, that we have to trust on their word over thousands of years, when also the church councils happened at least a generation or two after the death of the actual supposed Christ figure.
There
right?
are
So
there,
no, as a historian, there's not a, there
there
was
are
probably a
Alex,
historical
sorry.
Christ.
There are
But the
theologians. There are
verifiability.
theologians who
I'm not.
pinpoint the gospel
I ain't
as
gonna do
having
it
been
this way.
written
If we're gonna
not
talk about it, we're
long,
gonna talk
not
about it another
hundreds
time.
of years after.
Yeah, we can't.
Matthew's
I'm
gospel
not
would
talking
have
about
been
the
written
theologians right
60
now.
AD.
I'm not engaging into this ex cathedra, all
So,
this. I'm not a papist. I'm
I mean,
not. I don't
can I
believe in.
have
I don't
Kenny?
believe in
I'd
church. I
like
don't
to hear.
believe in hierarchy.
I want.
Fine, fine.
Can
You're
we?
entitled to that. I'm not forcing you to go to mass on Sunday. I'm
Can,
just telling you you call yourself a historian.
I
You should
am.
learn a little
Can
bit
we?
more about history.
Okay, what do I need to learn? See, this is what I hate.
So,
Is this
Alex,
attitude
This is what
of
you
no,
hate.
yes, because
This
We're
is
gonna
this
have
what
to
you
let him do his
hate.
thing.
this no, I'm gonna be real with you right now. Let me be real
Kenny,
with
Be
can
you.
you
real.
jump in?
No,
Kenny?
because this
I haven't
attitude
heard from
of
Kenny.
supposition about what I know. What do I need to learn? Tell me what
Kenny,
I need
can
to
you
learn.
jump in? I'd like
Well,
to
you're
hear.
just
What Kenny.
No, don't worry
you're
about it. Let
saying
it go.
that I'm just trying to address the fact that you're saying that the Gospels were written hundreds of years after, unless I misunderstood you, saying that the Gospels were written hundreds of years
Generations,
after,
several
and
generations after.
how many?
Several generations after.
Okay,
There's
well,
no
how many years
historical
is
evidence
that?
for them until at least 90 AD or 100 something
Okay,
AD.
This is
90.
a.
And there were many
that could
competing
be
gospels with
okay.
very
Let the Lord work.
different narratives about what's going on during that time.
There is a difference of opinion on that. There is theologians. There are theologians that have pinpointed John's gospel as 60, 70 AD.
Still
So
a whole 30 years after the supposed death of Christ.
okay,
So
all right.
I'd like to have Kenny jump in.
So
30 years is a drop in the bucket.
30
30
in
years
terms of
is-
the transit of
Look at the Kennedy
information
assassination.
during the
what 60
and look
years
how much
ago, and we're still writing
misinformation
about that.
there already is. It's almost impossible to know what really happened during that time. And we live in a much more digital recorded age than there was.
Wouldn't you
then.
say that about?
And you're saying I need to learn
anything?
history, like, and then you're trying to say that you have respect.
We have.
But then
we
there's all
have,
these sneak disses.
so
For me.
I-
I mean, this
so
is
we
what I
have,
don't like about dealing with the religious.
Okay.
Well, that's fine.
So we have. So
But you
the
just don't want.
episode-
You just don't like a little pushback.
We have.
I'm pushing you back too. I mean, what do you?
I know,
I love
don't
it.
like it.
I
Like
love it.
that's what's crazy. I'm obviously loving this right now. Again, because he doesn't want to put words in my mouth, and then he's putting words in my mouth. It's beautiful.
So
How did I put words in your mouth?
What you just said. You said I didn't like pushback. I'm
That's not
obviously
putting
like,
words in
you
your
keep
mouth.
doing it. What? Yes,
No,
it
but
is.
we had. So we had an intention of the episode. I'd like Kenny to just jump in.
Can I just say, Eduardo, I
Yeah.
would like to let this. You guys keep doing your thing for a while, and just let it do its thing. So you guys let us know when you're ready. James and Alex.
This is real life. This is a clear
exactly.
This is a clear representation of the shit that needs to be hashed out.
Exactly.
That I personally think is deviating us from the point, of, but it's real because, for people who want to transform, who see something wrong, right, want to take action, and if you are willing to be an honest person and cross those lines that you're not supposed to, we are gonna have to deal with this stuff, and so I have my own opinions. My dad is super, evangelical Christian. He talks to me about the Bible. We've had our own arguments, and so, but at the end of the day, for me, it comes back to, because Catholicism is one way of viewing the world, when, belief, practicing spirituality, and there are many other ways, right, that have, I think, intrinsically good goals, right? Like for good living, for good internal and external living. But again, I don't care about what people say, because I grew up with a lot of Catholics and evangelicals, and that then don't show up, and that explains some of my cynicism about religion, the institution of religion, because some of the holiest people are people that might be looked down upon, like, I grew up around prostitution, around people who robbed for a living, indigenous people who were looked as trash because they were dirty. And, but like at the end of the day, what matters is, what do you actually do when shit hits the fan? And that's what I'll be looking for, that's what I've taken as a lesson for me. you know, and these things are emotionally charged. You know, we are told we don't talk about politics and religion. I say no, the opposite. We have to talk about these things and be honest, you know, and be open. You know, and I myself, I know that I'm stubborn in my ways, like, and I always have a hard time listening. But I know that I will go home and consider some things, you know, because otherwise there is no point. You know, just stay in your box, in your extreme, and then we won't come to any sort of useful thing. You know, and so, but again, I want to bring it back to the action, right? Like, and I actually see value in dishonesty. You know, that again, a lot of people are uncomfortable with. You know, and especially on the left, to be honest, like, you know, we're supposed to in group think, right? Like, that is a human thing, that you are agreeable and you're not supposed in to, you know, sometimes you have that fucking internal anxiety that you want to say something but you don't. And but you know, what I say is that for people who see something as deeply wrong, it doesn't feel right, you have to learn to exercise that muscle, right? Like, to have the courage to say something when you don't feel comfortable, when you're anxious about something, you know, when it feels wrong, because you do have to, because I've been wrong so many times on this fucking show. Like, you know, like, and I don't edit anything, like, they know, like, I don't want to, part of it is I have other commitments, but I say what I say, and maybe I'll cringe later and I'll be like, oh, that wasn't what I meant, or that's, you know, or Jeff will correct me a lot of the time.
So here,
But yeah,
there are so I'm currently organizing in different mission schools. I'm in the mission district in San Francisco, and I'm organizing families around conversations that are challenging at this time. So a few of them, it's just there's a new law that's enacted about recess now is a right and shouldn't be cut into students' time at school day. There's also a conversation we're having around homework. Should it be given to the elementary school students or not? We're having conversations about what curriculum LGBT is being taught right now in schools or not. That's another conversation. And we have other conversations. And a lot of times what happens is we have these community meetings and they go on and on and on and on. And there's so many points to tackle. And we have people who are clearly conservative immigrants who don't want their kids to learn about LGBT issues. And we have families from SF, long traditions of SF politics, who want their kids to learn the new curriculum. And then we have, you know, people like me who I'm trying to facilitate these conversations. But in that, sometimes we discuss recess, or we discuss this, or we discuss way teachers approaches, and we cannot solve all these issues in one community meeting. And so I like the conversation we're having, but I want to know if the direction that this episode is going into, because we have several points that we are discussing here, and the discussion that Alex and James are having is the history of religion, and specifically the Catholic religion, as well as maybe even the Bible, and so that is a conversation that I would set aside for a future episode if we had one. And I just don't know if this is the conversation for it. Go ahead, Andy.
So, like you, Eduardo, in the beginning of when James, you, and Alex were kind of going in that conversation back and forth, I had an urge at first to kind of come in and be like, let's stop this. And then I realized that your conversation you guys just had is everything this episode is about. And not because it's bad or because it's good, but because it's real. And so you guys can take this conversation anywhere you want. If you want to carry it back into the differences you have about Alex, where you come from in terms of your view of institutional religion, and James, where you come from. If you want to have that, I welcome you to do it. What I'll say is that Alex, I'm learning to build trust with you because politically you and I are closer. But I can say that closeness has not been tested by an outside force that's come in and said, I'm about to fuck you, Andy. Who's gonna be on my side? I'm politically not as close with James, probably even around views of institutional religion, although, well, I'm going to say something about my brother, because what's happened with my brother has both been influenced by James, even if he doesn't know it, but it's also influenced how I respond to James as he talks about his own beliefs in religion. So I believe politically I'm farther away from James, but closer to him by virtue of the actual experience of unity that I felt when faced with a common enemy, and that he was willing to defend me and I was willing to defend him. And so that all just exists here. And neither of you have had that experience with each other. So you have that difference, and here you go, and this will just be part of, because I know, I really hope, Alex, you'll continue with us. I really hope, James, you'll continue with us. That's just going to be part of moving forward together in some way, shape, or form, is a difference you both know. And maybe you're looking at each other with an eye like going, that person, I don't know about that, whatever. I don't want to put words into your thing. But I'll say this. I really don't believe in institutions of any sort. I don't believe in the state institutions, and I believe that all religious institutions are being connected to those states. I believe all corporate institutions are being connected to those states. So I believe institutions are in my belief, ultimately revolutions are going to have to dismantle those institutions. But in terms of what happens to people when they accept God in their heart, it has been interesting to watch the transformation of my brother, and to see him become, in my opinion, much more of a revolutionary than he's ever been in his life, in terms of prisons have to be gone down, his understanding of the U.S. military complex. Now, he believes that's going to have to be replaced with God as king. That's what revolution means to him. That's not what it means to me. But all the world he's looking at it very similar to I look at it. Where he sees it going, I don't know if we're on the same page. But I find myself much more in touch with my brother in the days today. And in seeing that, I'm much more open to the idea that the actual fight that we must wage against the system that's pressing us all is going to have it's going to change us all in ways, as long as we are together with each other. I guess that's what I would say. And so, I guess I'll leave it at that, because I'm glad you guys kind of let yourself loose and just kind of did what you're going to do, because this is just what exists. And I am familiar, Alex, with what you say, and there's many of those things I do believe. It's just not stuff that's going to come up for me and James, because I don't trip up. It doesn't lead me to a place of distrust, because early on, James, you already built that trust. So we may have differences on a whole set of political questions. I'm prepared to just come to that bridge when we get there and be like, all right, we disagree here, we disagree there. It's the trust in action that was so central. And I guess I'll say one thing, because Eduardo brought up this thing of left and right coalition. What I'm describing for myself is not about left and right coalition. It's really just me describing myself as I'm not in a party. I'm not in an organization. There's not a movement that I'm a part of that feels like it's going towards revolution. I'm just trying to find my comrades. I'm come to believe that I don't believe if there's a left that's blue and there's a red and there's a right that's red, I'm going to be traveling over red and blue territory to find comrades. That's what I'm describing. Can there be a coalition between those forces? That I probably have some questions ultimately, in terms of, if we're going to have a revolution, I think everyone's ultimately going to have to understand a capitalist system is what's going to have to be dealt with. But for me, the idea of finding comrades that I can trust and build and work with, the ground can be red and the ground can be blue. There can be people there for me to talk to. That's what I'm describing.
Yeah, and I just want to say, I didn't mean to categorize this as left and right. Again, it's for conventional sake. I think our audience might understand this and might not. I think as well, I've moved away. My very, very close childhood friend is a Trump supporter, and he will vote for Trump. And he just recently posted a picture of himself in a motorcycle and his long hair and U.S. American flag. Yeah. hard for me to watch all this transformation. But when I talk to him, obviously he doesn't buy into the crap that he says. I think he's more of just what he wants is his freedom and his liberty, and he's a gun owner. But I use conventional terms such as white or left or right because that's the way the world, especially here in the USA, we've learned these versions of what these terms of how we just make distinctions of one another. I don't also want to label anybody that way, and I've moved away from that sort of thinking myself. So just want to be clear on that.
Can I?
Does that make sense?
Yeah. Andy, what you said there about institutions, I think we found another common ground. And Alex, maybe this is a little bit of an olive branch I'd like to extend to you, my friend. During COVID, Pope Francis told Catholics taking the shot was an act of love. And so many times during that period, you know, I was pretty pissed off. You know, the shutting down of the churches, being told to go home and watch it on TV. Are you kidding me? So when Andy brings up institutions, then obviously many of the higher ups in the Catholic Church knew what side their bread was buttered on, and they weren't going to rock the boat at all. It's what would say grassroots level Catholics that have have always traditionally, really, we say the church is the lay church, keeping priests in line and driving them out of town when they needed to be driven out of town, right? For messing up. So that, I will just add that. I too agree that there are many problems with our institutions. We see it in Washington, D.C., we see it in the media, we see it in popular culture, music industry, film industry, and I think we're all being manipulated to a great degree, and we gotta fight back against that. And if the five of us talking here together helps us to do that and go forward, then I think it's a really good thing. Alex, let me have it.
It's just this, this is, I'm trying to concentrate my point because I don't mean to come off aggressively either. It is just, unfortunately, this is a very, there are real world action reasons for why I have this, attitude that I have because of the experiences that I've gone through and the thoughts that I've had to go through and the things that I've had to do and the things that have been done, so it's just hard for me to believe, like, okay, I hear that you can see that there was a problem with the way that the church was structured for this issue. And for me, my question for you is, why isn't that the case with everything else? Why isn't there just the lay church? Why does there have to be because that to me is obviously, I mean, there's this whole other historical baggage of like the Protestants and what that meant. And I don't mean to invoke that. Okay. But to me, just on a different human question, why is it that there's even a need for priests? Why is it that because as you're saying, the church, the true faithful, right? As Christ said, where two or more are gathered in my name, there am I also. Right. And if all you need is the presence of the figure, then I don't see why you need an intermediary to interpret that which is a freely flowing fountain, supposedly, right? Of blessing. And I just like, that's my thing. And then in terms of, to address what you were saying about me being scattered, the fact of the matter is there is such a wide array. My it's hard for me to communicate about these things, and I understand I should refine the way in which I communicate about these things, but it's also because I see the way in which all of these things are connected and tied together, and that is a part of the reason for my passion around opposing the Catholic Church as well, because of my own years of refinement. I have come to see it as a force to be reckoned with, and I there's a kind of reckoning that I believe is not being talked about enough, because it also needs to happen among the so-called faithful, because I as I said at the beginning, I used to want to be a priest. I was a fool. I went all the way into my confirmation. I did all these things. I have my own conception of belief now, but I understand that this is something that I need to be able to bring somehow, but I also feel like, I'm bringing together charges of treason against somebody. You know what I mean? It's not an easy thing to do, in terms of like, I feel like
No,
that's sort of how
I
I'm
didn't
coming
mean
from.
to say that like you were scattered. I just meant that it was hard to when I just want to jump in on one point, then you're 5 points down the path, and I'm trying to remember them all. That's all, Alex. No, it's if I could just briefly say the way I understand it about the priesthood, the way I understand it, the way I was taught in my own research, that at the Last Supper, Jesus ordained the apostles as the first priests, right? In the breaking of the bread. And the ordination of priests has to do a lot with the consecration of the body and blood in the Holy Mass, right? So only consecrated, ordained hands can perform that, not a deacon, not the laity, so that's how I understand it, and I think that's the legitimate the way it would be taught to kids in school and Catholic school. And
No,
all that.
I've heard that before, and again, I just want to, because I want to also bring together a point that you had brought up as well about me in terms of seeking faith amongst man. And here's the thing, if I
I think
want
that
to,
was for all of us in general.
if I want to take your paradigm, the fact of the matter is, the way I see it, the only God speaks in every way possible. Okay. And so to believe in the primacy of special revelation over everyday observation and the accumulation of knowledge and wisdom, I think is a fatal mistake, because it's also impossible to verify the validity of revealed truth of, and this is a debate going back. I mean, I would really highlight actually like Indian philosophy and religious development, because there were many people there at that time. There were the like Orthodox Hindus who believed in the primacy of their scriptures and of their priests, and then there were the Gnostica unorthodox, who the Buddhists came from, the Jainists came from, but there were also other groups that professed a wide array of philosophical beliefs. But they essentially, were trying to say that the verification of knowledge and the way to experience divine truth is found outside of text or authority. And that's essentially my argument, is I think that Christianity and the whole the Judeo line, coming from, I think Islam had this conversation a little bit, but starting from Judaism, there wasn't as much of this conversation of how do you verify knowledge? It happened a little bit, but I think the average believer did not have to go through this reckoning. And it's one in which I believe that it's a very vital question here.
Alex, do you reject all evidence of miracles?
I put a high burden of proof on miracles.
That's fair.
I wouldn't say that I reject, because my thing is, well, here's I have to reconcile my belief in knowledge with my understanding of the imperfection of knowledge, right? Yeah. I know that I can never truly explain, and there's this ability to peer in and to try to understand, but it is limited. And so, thinking of something as a miracle, is fine. But I guess here's my thing. In a way, I think thinking of it as a miracle is also deterministic on the other side, right? So like instead of saying that, this must have been some natural phenomenon, you're assuming just on the recounting of the tale, without having been a personal, a viewer of the tale, that it must have been some sort of divine thing. And there are also a lot of accounts of divine moments being hoaxes, and so because of that reason,
Sure.
and because it's far outside any
That's
kind
why-
of scope of understanding, I just try to avoid it. Not that I reject
That's
it
why the
totally.
Catholic Church is very skeptical about claimed miracles.
I know
Yeah.
that the church itself is very. This is an understanding that I developed first when I was Catholic. It's not.
But I was just thinking, like, for example, the scientific evidence of the Juan Diego's tilma, the image of Our Lady of Guadalupe, right? Only much later, through scientific developments of the microscope, we're able to detect and scientifically test the shroud. Same with the Shroud of Turin, right? Where it's been tested, and you see that no human hand could have possibly painted it. There's no evidence of pigment of paint. The telescope was developed, and it wasn't until many years later when the scientist zoned in on the eye of the Virgin Mary, and it's so tiny, only the microscope can bring out the reflection of the people in the room when Juan Diego gave forth he gave forth the roses there, right? According to the narrative, right? So for me anyway, when I see those things, I say always be skeptical, right? Take the science. We should not be anti-science in that regard, but we should not put all of our faith in science. So when I see something like that, I personally don't feel like weak, like a weakened person by saying, "Oh, I believe in a miracle," So I would say don't discount archaeology and other scientific developments that might. That's all I was going to say. So that's I like what you're saying about that. We got to be skeptical, and that we have to be. We have an intellect, right? We should use our intellect. We don't have to believe something just because somebody told us that it's true, and you need to believe this or you're going to go to hell. Question that.
Or did you want?
Yeah, no, I have to go. Like it's but yeah, maybe again, I do agree with a lot of them. Maybe we should have an episode on faith and religion, because I want to bring liberation theology into the thing. So,
And I want to bring science. I want to bring science into this. And
I'm going to bring superstition and guilt.
That's the standard Catholic response.
Remember, Alex, you forgot your shame shirt.
Kenny was trying to he was trying to have a little fun with me. He was like, "You should wear a shirt that says shame across it."
Let's call it an end here, and Eduardo will take us out. And Kenny, can you just go right after that?
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I think we have. I'm looking for the outro. I think we have an episode for future, which I think we have to plan for more than 2 hours, because it is great to delve into a lot of matters, and we all have to come prepared. I'd love to have a conversation about that. James, you bring up my former Jehovah's Witness background, whether I'm not a Jehovah's Witness today, but my studies on the Bible, and I'd love to delve into that, and as well as my after studies after the Bible, on what I came to do in order to either understand my past or not. So anyhow, we'll have an episode on that, and I look forward to that. And that's a conversation we'll have. So let's wrap up as we do this outro. Just hold on. Anything you all want to say before, briefly?
First, I want to say, James, thank you for doing this. Alex, thanks you for being yourself. And anybody who's watching this and wondering what this episode was about, you got to listen to the whole thing to find out what this episode was about. And I really hope we don't have these guys come back and edit some of this stuff.
Andy, I want to thank you. Kenny, Alex, Eduardo, I want to thank you all very much, and look forward to the next time.
Yeah. It was a good conversation. I mean, I am thankful that I was at least able to express myself truly without being driven out of the town as the lunatic that I might have been in certain other circles. So there's that to look at, So there's a little bit of action if you want to talk about that, Kenny.
mean,
All right.
Alex, this is only the beginning. We're going to grow closer and closer. Hopefully
Kenny?
without fists clenched.
I think there is something to say about censorship here, and that, that's not a path for liberation for anybody.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that does it for this week's episode. What Left is a weekly political podcast / channel challenging the mainstream left. We post information about our topics and our guests on the episode notes wherever you found this episode or on our blog at whatsleftpodcast.com. You can find past episodes to this podcast / channel there and connect with us. I remind folks, if you fancy anything you have heard here, please subscribe, rate, review, turn on your notifications to any of our platforms on Spotify, iTunes Podcast, BitChute, Odyssey, YouTube, Rumble, or Telegram. You can find our blog and any of those links in the episode notes. Wherever you found this episode, if you would like to give us feedback about something you've heard or suggest something for us to cover, contact us through our blog. I already got feedback about the way I say the intro and the outro too fast, so thank you. I'm Eduardo Barca with co-hosts Kenny Cepeda and Alex and James. Thank you for being with us, and we'll check you all. We'll have you on next time. And thank you all for listening. Ciao.